Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanacha Yamuna Tira Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yamuna Tira Vanacha Yamuna Tira Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Yamuna Tirabana Cha Yamuna Tirabana Cha Yamuna Tirabana Cha Yamuna Tirabana Cha Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajikacharya Astatara Sata Shri Shriman's Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Nanta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Si Kaho Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Skunda Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mathura Dham Ki Navadvip Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Gaur Premanandi. Are we broadcasting?
Yeah, later.
Huh?
Are we record and later we could...
You can tell me the link then later. So I can tell people.
It's okay?
No, it can be higher. I was trying to sit up, but my back is weak all of a sudden. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, I hope you don't mind. Krishna is showing us how temporary nature of the nice-looking body doesn't take much to disturb everything, right? It's so slight, actually, of a change, but it looks like you finished. There's one group in Thailand, they're Buddhist, and I went to their ashram, and they had a picture book full of pictures from hospitals and injured bodies and, messed up, terrible things. And to help them meditate on the ephemeral nature of the beauty of the material thing. To not be attracted to the external beauty of the body because it's really not so nice. So that's a good meditation. In Japan, they have these cherry blossoms. I think we saw them in Paso also. So they're very beautiful, but they don't last very long. So traditionally, the Buddhists would go to cherry blossom viewing, and they would meditate on that this is very beautiful, but it is not lasting very long, only a few days. Now they still go and do it, but nobody knows why they do it. They go and get drunk and have barbecues. They lose their tradition understanding. So since we came up so much about 7th Canto, Chapter 1 this morning, and I thought we'd go over it again. It's a very important verse. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manakparta Yogam Yunjan Maya Sakta Manasparta Asamsayam Asamagramam Yata Gyasyasi Tachrinu. Anyone else know it, or you have it? It's available in books and online and in the phones. And nowadays we have easy access. Previously, devotees memorized everything. Somebody?
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaparta Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Samsayam Samagramam Yatajasyasi Tachrinu. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaparta Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Samsayam Samagramam Yatagyasya Tachrinu. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaparta Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Samsayam Samagramam Yagyasya Tachrinu. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaparta Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Samsayam Samagramam Yatagyasya Tachrinu.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaparta
Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Samsayam Samagramam Yatagyasya Tachrinu. Ladies. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaparta Samyunyam Madashraya Samsayam Samagramam Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Supreme Lord said, Mai, to me, asakta mana, mind attached, parta, Asana Prita, Yogam, self-realization, Yunjam, practicing, Mad Ashraya, and consciousness of me, Krishna, Krishna consciousness, Samsayam, completely, or without doubt, Samagram, completely, Mam, me, Yata, how, Yes, Yasi, you can know, Tat, that, Shinu, try to hear. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, now hear, O son of Prita, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So note how many times does Krishna say me in this verse? Somebody can count?
3 times.
3 times. And the Mayavadis say he doesn't mean me. Some verses 5 times, sometimes more, because he says a me and a hum and a mine, and they say he doesn't mean that. And then if he didn't mean it, why would he say it so many times? Maybe once or twice it would slip out, but he meant it. He means me. It's always with a big... Okay, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the nature of Krishna consciousness is fully described. Krishna is full of all opulences, and how he manifests such opulence is described herein. Also, 4 kinds of fortunate people who become attached to Krishna and 4 kinds of unfortunate people who never take to Krishna are described in this chapter. In the list of 6 chapters of in the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the living entity has been described as non-material spirit soul, capable of elevating himself to self-realization by different types of yoga. At the end of the 6th chapter, it has been clearly stated that the steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna, or in other words, Krishna consciousness, is the highest form of all yoga. By concentrating one's mind upon Krishna, one is able to know the absolute truth completely, but not otherwise. Impersonal Brahmajyoti, or localized Paramatma realization, is not perfect knowledge of the absolute truth, because it is partial. Full and scientific knowledge of Krishna, and everything is revealed to the person in Krishna consciousness. In complete Krishna consciousness, one knows that Krishna is the ultimate knowledge beyond any doubts. Different types of yoga are only stepping stones on the path of Krishna consciousness. One who takes directly to Krishna consciousness automatically knows about Brahmajyoti and Paramatma in full. By practice of Krishna conscious yoga, one can know everything in full, namely the absolute truth, the living entities, the material nature, and their manifestations and paraphernalia. One should therefore begin yoga practice as directed in the last verse of the 6th chapter, concentration of the mind upon Krishna, the Supreme, is made possible by prescribed devotional service in the different forms, of which Shravanam is the first and most important. The Lord therefore says that Arjuna has Shinu, Tat Shinu, hear from me. No one can be a greater authority than Krishna. Therefore, by hearing from him, one receives the greatest opportunity to become a perfectly Krishna conscious person. One has therefore to learn from Krishna directly or from a pure devotee of Krishna and not from a non-devotee upstart puffed up with academic education. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this process of understanding Krishna, the personality of Godhead, the absolute truth, is described in the second chapter of the first canto as follows. Shrinvata swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtanam ridyantak yabhidranabi vidunoti saritsatam nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat utama shloke bhaktir bhagavati naistiki. Everyone knows that one, right? That's common before class. Tada rajas tamo bhava kama loba dayas chaye cheta etayar navidam stitam sattve prasidati evam prasana manaso bhagavat bhakti yogata bhagavat tattva vigyanam mukta sangha dasya jayate vidyate hridaya grantis Chinta chidyante sarva samshaya chiyante chasya karmani drista evat manishvare. Translation. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literature or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as the best-wishing friend and purifies his devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops the dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of asamsayam samagram, understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, absolute truth, personality of Godhead. Bhagavatam 1, 2, 17 through 21. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness, one can understand the science of Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksuramilitanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sajajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarani Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavaranaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gora Tushe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. So, Maya Sakta, mind absorbed in me. This is, how does it go? Shraddha, and then Sadhana, and then Nishtha, and then Ruchi, and then Asakti. So it's very advanced, right? And you can get it easily from this chapter, because everything is there. And the whole Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 basic sections. The first 6 chapters are mostly about karma yoga. But bhakti is always there, but not like it's stressed absolutely. Except the last verse says, of all yogas, one who's always thinking of me is the best. And then it starts with chapter 7. The six chapters, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, are all about Krishna. Where, like I said, me and my and I, so many times. So anyone who can't, but Krishna is also so clever that for the atheist he's covered over and they can't see that. They can read the Bhagavad Gita without seeing Krishna. And Vyasadeva never said Krishna Uvacha. He's always saying Bhagavan Uvacha. Although everybody knows it's Krishna, is Bhagavan, still they don't catch it. So Prabhupada had this unlimited faith in the process of hearing. I was looking, but I'm not online, for that poem that he wrote after or maybe just before he got to America, right after he arrived. I don't know why he sent me to such a terrible place. Everyone is covered with ignorance and passion. But I have faith that if I can make them hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, it will get through to them. He had the full faith in that, so he managed to do it somehow or other. All he had with him was his books. He had no money when he came. He did have some money after he landed, because he sold the 3 books to the captain of the ship for $20. So we had $20 when he got to America. That time, you could eat for a few days. Now, I don't know how long it would last. But he didn't need the money at the time. But then, when he went, he just worked so hard to sell the books. And nobody never heard of Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita was known, but he didn't have a Bhagavad Gita in print. He only had the first canto. He put it in the bookstores. And when we read his diary, so many days that he got a letter from the bookshop, come and take the books back. Because they didn't buy them. they put them on the shelf, and if somebody bought one, then they would give Prabhupada the money. So he had to go around every day, to give out books, picking up books, and sometimes picking up money. But somehow he was writing to so many people, and guests were coming a little bit, and he would always mostly sell a book. Sometimes one book, sometimes none. Sometimes his donations at one day was $1, or his expenses were 25 cents for some cauliflower or something, bus fare. But he got a few people interested in, and we read about the early devotees. I just read the book by Govindadasi. So, they were artists, Gaurasundar and Govindadasi. And so Prabhupada immediately engaged her in painting. So they bought the book, the Bhagavatam, 3 books. And she would paint all day, and Gaurasundar would read to her from the Bhagavatam. So they read it over and over again. And they really relished it. Same thing with, Mukunda had that with him when he went to visit Shamsundar and Malati. And they read the Bhagavatam, and immediately that was it. They just wanted to go start a temple. They wanted to spread it. They had never even met Prabhupada, but they were totally convinced. So Prabhupada had that faith. Kirata, Hunandra, Pulinda, Pukasha, Yavana, Kashadaya, Abhaya, whatever. Ye and Ye Chapapa, Yadapashraya Saya. So those lists, Hunandra, Pulinda, Pukasha, those are all so-called low-class people, low-born people, uncivilized types of people. I don't know how Andhrans or somehow the northern Indians considered Andhrans to be very uncivilized, even though that's where so many temples are, Tirupati. But Prabhupada had complete faith, so he could go anywhere in the world and he could preach, because he had faith, because Hunandra, Yenyesha Papa Yadapashaya Saya Shudyanti Tasmai Prabhu Vishnave Namaha. If they just hear the message of the devotees, they hear the Bhagavatam, it will affect them and change them. Prabhupada had that faith, so he could go anywhere with only the Bhagavatam. No language, no help, no money in the beginning. Later, in his disciples, he could send them. He used to sit there in New York, and they considered themselves a little out of place even in New York City, being devotees, and in such a crazy place. And he had a globe, and he would go around and say, Brahmananda can go here, and so-and-so can go here, somebody can go there, and they were like wondering, what is he talking about? But then he told them, and they went. Like Shivananda came to Germany, very young at the time. Govindadasi, they went to Hawaii, which of course was America, but quite far away from Prabhupada. The devotees went to San Francisco on their own. And they were not learned. And Mukunda and Janaki had been with Prabhupada a little bit. And Shyamasundar had, they'd been reading the Bhagavatam, but the biography, the books they wrote said like Jamuna and Gurudas were still smoking dope in the basement, when they first were preaching in San Francisco. But they were still preaching, and they had nothing. They had the kirtan, and they had some attachment for Prabhupada, and they got purified, and they attracted so many people. Krishna attracted them. And then Prabhupada came, and everything just happened. So this is still going on. It's interesting how Prabhupada wrote that when he arrived, because, well, at that time, I don't know how many Indians were even thinking about America. Then we read how much trouble Prabhupada had to get all the papers and passports and visas, and not only that, many other things in order to go to America and get a sponsor. He asked so many men, and then one man told his son, and they didn't believe Prabhupada would ever come because they had sponsored many before and nobody ever came. And so when Prabhupada was getting on the ship practically, he wrote a letter to them and said, I'll be arriving in 30 days, 30, 45 days, or whatever it was. So they were really shocked, But they had 1 month to get ready. But they loved Prabhupada so much that lady recently left her body. Think about, she was coming to the Prabhupada festivals in New Vrindavan and talking about Prabhupada. And they served, she was American, her husband was Indian, and she had no knowledge whatsoever except that this was a friend of her grandfather, her her whatever you call it, her husband's father, and it was to be respected. She had no idea what is a Swami or, any, like an Indian would have, but she just took care of Prabhupada like she would her grandfather. So it's quite amazing, that she just got that special benediction. First person in America to meet Prabhupada and to be able to serve him personally. And Prabhupada cooked for them. And they really liked his cooking. And she arranged some speaking engagements because people would see him walking around. It's a small town of America, and people are very conservative in those places, and so they were very curious, but it was a university town, so a little bit open-minded. So she engaged some preaching engagements and some interviews, so people would know who it was and where he's coming from. So she did so much. Sally Agarwal. And Prabhupada played with her children, and so this is Prabhupada. So he gave us these Bhagavad Gita purports. You can read any one of them, see how much detail and how much effort went into all these things. And if we could read these 5 verses of the Bhagavatam, but this first one, Shinvatat Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtanam, is simply hearing about Krishna from the right source, is in itself pious activity. It's the most pious activity. It's stressed so many times. If we can just, anyone who hears about Krishna, they're going to be attracted. They're going to want to hear more. Hopefully this will be our, what happens to us. The more we hear about Krishna, we want to hear more and more. Arjuna said, go on telling me more and more, I never get tired of it. The sages at Naimishranya also said, we never tire of hearing this. Please go on and on and on. Our mind might say, well, I heard this before, sometimes we think, like if we go to Louis Bazaar, that bookshop, oh, Maharaj, come in, I've got 10,000 books here, I said, I'm sorry, but I have, I have Prabhupada's books, and we want to get, there's unlimited ocean there. We're reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, and one word that just came up so many times, it's called unfathomable. Unfathomable. Is that how you say it? Anybody know what that is? Fathom is a measuring the depth of the ocean. The ship would drop something down, and I don't know, it's some amount of feet, and so the fathom is they hit the bottom. But and they go far enough in the ocean, there's no bottom, you know, they can't find it. So that this knowledge of the Chaitanya Lila, it says over and over again, there's no depth. It's no matter how deep you dive, like now they can't go down to people, but they send these cameras down, and they find all kinds of new living things nobody ever knew about before. So the deeper we go into Prabhupada's books, Krishna pastimes, there's no limit. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's always expanding. It's not an ordinary literature that makes us, you know, okay, I read this, I passed the exam, now what's next? You know, it's not like that. There's no final exam, you know. It's just that we want to develop love for it. It's not reading to just get knowledge and defeat somebody in an argument, or, you know, to be the biggest scholar and know the most slokas or something. It's the person who can actually relish the Bhagavatam and just want to hear it again and again and again. And of course, Chaitanya Charitamrita, anything from Srila Prabhupada and his followers. And we see how it's affecting the world. All kinds of people are giving up sinful activities, taking up devotional service in very amazing ways, worshiping deities for many, many years in very opulent ways. I didn't go really early to Vrindavan in 1975, and the other temples were very run-down places, you know. And because of ISKCON, sometimes ISKCON devotees, but others, you know, seeing the example of the standards that Prabhupada was setting for deity dressing and deity worship and steadiness, and, you know, it's inspired all the temples now, and they've all become way up in their standards. And of course, more and more money's coming in because Prabhupada attracted so many people. Krishna, Balaram, all attractive. Prabhupada knew what he was doing, but always have to be books. He said every program Prabhupada did, there's always a book display, and the devotee speaking would have to explain all the books, you know, hold them up and say what these books are, and then devotees would be going around the audience selling the books. So Prabhupada always stressed that. His Bhagavad Gita we were reading, I was just reading recently how, you know, he had finished his first translation and commentary, and he was seeking donations through his back to Godhead. And somebody had volunteered. Prabhupada went to collect the donation. When he came back, he couldn't find the manuscript. It was stolen. I read one place he suspected his son, but he never pursued it or accused him or anything. But he just wrote it again. And in some ways that was an advantage because he was learning more and more about America. But he was so determined, and when he had so many handwritten translations of the Bhagavatam, when Hayagriva Prabhu asked him, you know, if something he could do, he said, yeah, you can type this, and he took out a huge pile of handwritten translations. Prabhupada had also typed, you know, himself, but he wasn't very fast. But he was steady every day, throughout any thick and thin, unbelievable circumstances. Health. Prabhupada he said he never had one day of good health in America when he, you know, but nobody suspected that. Sometimes they did, because right away, very early on, he had that heart attack or whatever it was, and was hospitalized, and then recovering. Then he went he really didn't know if he was going to live. He'd only been a few months preaching. And he went to India for Ayurveda. He came back after 6 months, really healthy and good. And then he went really strong for a long time, but he was always struggling. We get people talking like, they don't understand. All you have to do is read anything somebody wrote that was with Prabhupada in those days. How many times he was, but he never showed it. He never, bogged down like we do. He just going strong. So we have the Bhagavad Gita. We have his purports, and this one is, quite incredible, I think. So let's stop there and take any questions. We could read the next verse. I shall now declare to you this fullest knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous, which being known, nothing further remains to be known. And then all of a sudden this one just pops up. We'll read, stop there. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who achieve perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So it's considered a type of perfection just to realize you're not the body. But most of the people that achieve that, they don't know Krishna. They don't know who they are. They don't know what. They just know they're not the body. And it's not a permanent situation. It's quite unpleasant, actually. I remember one time when I was first trying to think about yoga and stuff, there was one Swami, very famous Swami Rama, from the Himalayan Institute. And I read about him later. He was very famous for sitting in the snow in the winter and meditating, and he was very beautiful, long hair, and like what you thought a yogi was. When we saw Prabhupada, it didn't fit the normal description, but when he spoke, everything was clear. So this Swami did some kind of meditation, and he really created this understanding you're not the body. But I was panicking. I was thinking, well, what am I? Where am I? I felt like just like in the Superman comics, they had this negative zone they'd throw the criminals into or something, and they were just floating around and they couldn't communicate or they couldn't do anything. They were still living. So it was horrible. I never wanted to pursue it. And then I kind of gave up on yoga, but I knew it had to be something there. So finally, Krishna's mercy, we met devotees and we got the Bhagavad Gita. Took a while. At first there was no Bhagavad Gitas in print, but finally came. But we had, a few copies around, and the devotees could lecture from it. So, the samsayam, the samagramam, you can know me in doubt, free from doubt, know me in full, free from doubt by practicing this yoga, this Bhakti yoga, which is basically Shravana, Kirtana, Smaranam, then, praying, all these things, but always Shravanam and Kirtana. Kirtan especially, is what keeps us strong. It's what, it's what Lord Chaitanya's movement, and it's what attracting people all over the world. Now Kirtan has become very popular, so all over the world people want Kirtan. They're inviting devotees to all kinds of programs for Kirtan. So thank you all for, doing all this. And Germany is really quite exemplary from the very beginning. Prabhupada glorified Germany. He talked about Hitler and said, if one German, look what one German man did, So the Germans, they're doing so wonderful, and they published all the books very quickly, translated very quickly, and published, and still distributing so much. So we'll just stop for comments and questions. It's 7:30 almost. So, yeah.
You were speaking about that Prabhupada has complete faith. Can you comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah. That's, Prabhupada, that's what someone asked me, like, what affected me most about Prabhupada was he just had such absolute conviction about what he was saying, free from doubt, He wasn't just quoting scripture and, giggling or something like a lot of yogis recite. He was talking about Krishna, and he knew it was Krishna. He knew Krishna's everywhere, and he knew Krishna's in everyone's heart. And he knew that if we'd hear about Krishna, that, we'd come through, it would get through. Okay? Anyone else? Yes.
Which was the first deities?
Huh?
Which was the deities in the first temple of Prabhupada?
Which was what?
The first deities. Which was in the first temple of Prabhupada?
As far as I know, it was Jagannath in San Francisco. Which is a fascinating story. Everybody knows, right? It's always nectar, but first deity was Prabhupada, and the holy name. But in San Francisco, Malati was out shoplifting, liberating things. And she was in an import shop, and there was a bowl of these little dolls, from India, so she took one. And she just said, Swamiji, this from India we found, and what is it, And Prabhupada paid a dandavats. And he said, Jagannath has come, and he put him on the shelf, and he said, where there's a white one and a yellow one? And she said, I think so, and said, go get them. So they got them, and then he told Sham Sundar, can you make big ones? So they measured, and he started carving, and he was carving, and they were not advanced devotees at all. Shamananda was smoking still. One time Prabhupada came and the cigarette box was on top of Subhadra. Prabhupada took his cane and knocked it off. He said, try to smoke one less every day. So he stopped smoking. And he was going really slow because he thought, Prabhupada won't leave until they're finished. Prabhupada started pushing him, so they made the first Jagannath, and they installed him in the temple. And the installation was very simple. Prabhupada had a tray with a big candle, and then he had all the devotees do that. That was it, kirtan. And they started worshipping Lord Jagannath. Then they had Rath Yatra, and then he made more Jagannath. So he made actually 5 sets. One went to New York and London. They're still there in London. The New York ones are in another place now, but I don't know where the other 2 are. And I'm not sure which came next, if Radha Krishna came to LA or something. Not quite sure of the exact chronology. I think the first big Radha Krishna was in New York, Radha Govinda. So Jagannath is unlimitedly popular. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the lecture.
Can you speak really loud?
Thank you so much for the lecture and my best wishes to you, to your recovering.
I can't understand.
Thank you so much for the lecture and my best wishes for your recovery.
Thank you very much. I think it's recovering.
Yeah. Mike, I have a question.
The doctor was quite confident.
Huh? I have a question. That is here touch.
Yeah.
Shirino. Touch is translated like that. And Shirino is translated like try to hear. Question is what to hear.
Somebody
What
has
is
to
that?
repeat because
What to hear. So, what to hear and how really to hear, because we are saying and we too Shravanam, Shravanam, Shravanam. But what it really means?
what does hearing mean? It means really totally absorbed. As some say, the samagramam, completely absorbed. That's what it really means. Like not that we, I heard it, but I didn't listen, right? Sometimes we hear somebody talking and, we hear, but we're not really, the mind is many things going on. So real Shravana means, really absorbed, 100%. And maybe occasionally we get that, That's why it's very good to memorize slokas and memorize Sanskrit, because it requires a lot more concentration, because it's not our normal language or something. But it's like everything, kirtan too, it means kirtan only, nothing else, So that takes a lot of, prayer and endeavor to not be multitasking, right? The computer can multitask, but actually the human mind can't. We think we can, but it's just going back and forth, from one thing to another, so we're not really focused on anything, But we can be chanting, we can be hearing, and we can remember to some extent, but we might have thought of so many other things along the way. So that's why we need to hear more and more and start early in the morning. Pray. Please pray for me. It's getting harder to hear. All right? You can do that? 100%?
No, I can't.
You can. Just keep trying. Keep trying your whole life. Lord Chaitanya, is very merciful. And Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda is more merciful, Dayal Nitai. He'll give us credit for doing it right, if we just keep trying. And we should never think, now I've got it, because then we're going to go down.
Thank you.
Gratitude. I have one question about how to learn the divine quality of Prabhupada, of being so absorbed and convinced in Krishna that he never forgets him 1 second. So what can I do to go into deeper observation and never forget Krishna? Perhaps there's something I can take with me now. Gratitude.
Well, anything I say is theoretical, but by association of Prabhupada, which he's given so much of himself, with his books, he made such an effort to make all these books and to get them translated everywhere so that all over the world people can read them. And then he was, and also now the recorded things, by hearing directly from Prabhupada and concentrating the mind, that it comes, it's natural, but the covering has to be broken through so how to do it is just keep trying. Like, how does anybody do anything, like they say in sports or something, every champion was a beginner, and some of the biggest champions were the most uncoordinated when they started, or that they weren't the best, so they worked harder. And somebody who had a lot of so-called natural talent was puffed up, and they didn't practice enough, and they go down. Some of these athletes, they practice 8 hours a day, very strenuous, basic stuff over and over and over again. So that's what we have to do. So any kind of service, just the process is there. With the same question we always ask, and all I can say is we just stick to the process and have faith. Prabhupada had, a whole lifetime. His father, his grandfather, great father, they were all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Going back to, forget the name, but the Dutt, one famous Dutt, who was an intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya, and Prabhupada's family was from him, So he had, a lot of advantages we don't have. And his father was worshipping Radha and Krishna their whole life, and was a great devotee, and made sure Prabhupada had mridanga lessons, from early on, and harmonium, and scripture, not just music, scripture, and worshipping the deities, so, but Prabhupada wants to give it to us. So he's so merciful, he's promised, just keep going, But not that we don't do anything, but we try to do some of the 9 processes, at least one of them, focused on, but normally we do more than one. Especially Shravanam, Kirtanam, that always has to be there. Is that all right? Anyone else want to say something on that? Anyone has achieved it? Yes, sir?
I have one question, and like you said that Dayanita is even more merciful than Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And Narottam Das Thakur also says in one of his bhajans that one who has not established a relationship with Nityananda Prabhu, he has just wasted his life.
Yeah.
So what is the way to establish a relationship with Nityananda Prabhu like that?
Nityananda, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam. Kalona Stevana, Stevana, Steva Gatiranicha. That's all I know. He was, of course, always worshipping Lord Chaitanya, but he was always preaching. He was always going and asking everybody to chant Hare Krishna. So we can do that and follow his footsteps, and we're connected. Right? Anyone else have an idea? One of his footsteps, he went out every day. I think it went on and on way after Lord Chaitanya. Nityananda still traveled and preached and, inspired people to chant. He was Avaduta. We can't be that. But after Lord Chaitanya's disappearance, and when he was married, and he wasn't crazy Avaduta anymore, but he was a very opulent grihastha. Still, he was very jolly, and he was always surrounded and preaching the devotees. Okay? Anyone else? Looks like it's getting late. Thank you very much. Okay, so if it's late, time to break. Thank you very much for attentive audience and for being here. Very beautiful place. I heard about it a lot different times, but now I see. Very nice. And this hall downstairs, quite amazing. How Krishna provides, huh? Right? It was a supermarket or something? What was it before?
It was a market, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now it's a Namahata, huh? Yeah. Okay. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Shri Vijay Gauranga Dayal Nitai ki jai. Very beautiful also, very nicely cared for. Yeah. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Kavichandra,
That's the recording, huh?